R.L. Steve. Chris, when I was in Scientology, I knew that the RPF was a program that bad Sea Org members were sent to, but I always assumed it was something that lasted a few weeks to a few months. I didn't find out until years after I left Scientology that people spent years on the RPF. I've known some Scientologists who said there were parts of the RPF that they felt they really benefited from. Sometimes people actually do their whole bridge up to OT5, other times they do the false purpose rundown. One ex-Scientologist told me that the RPF was like BDSM without a safety word, in that while you are dominated and degraded and forced to be submissive, there were potentially good things you get out of it. In the BDSM community, some people are willing to pay $150 an hour to be dominated and degraded, and it's all for fun, but on the RPF, you really are a slave and degraded. There is no safety word for when things get too intense and you need to stop. It can get too heavy, and it can be hard to get out of. Was there any part of the RPF you enjoyed or you felt you benefited from, and do you agree with the BDSM analogy? The RPF is the Rehabilitation Project Force, which is basically the Sea Organization's prison detail, where they send people for reconditioning and handling because they have screwed up or because they have become extremely disaffected with the church, and they end up sending they say that you are in treason to the Sea Org, so you are relegated to the RPF, and it is a program that you have to sign forms and agree to do voluntarily, but it is a prison detail. I spent 3 years and 3 months on the RPF, and I haven't talked a lot about it, probably because it's the most intense and grueling and horrible part of my entire life. And it's not easy to encapsulate or explain all of that in a few words, except to say it was the most horrible thing that ever happened to me. The BDSM analogy is interesting. I never really considered it that way. In terms of degradation, yes. In terms of being, dominated, yeah. There is no, there's no sexual analogy here. We're just talking about the words degraded and dominated. Does somebody get something out of it? Well, here's the thing. People make the best out of any situation that they're in. And you can come away from almost any experience that you have with having learned something or trying to get something out of it. And of course, the entire mindset when you go into the RPF is that this is for your rehabilitation. This is that nobody in Scientology says this is reconditioning and that you're under, some Maoist torture camp now. In the Sea Organization, you're sent there because it's your fault and you screwed up and it's all on you. So, and people who end up there are in a very debased psychological state. So they're not there thinking that the Sea Org is punishing them. They think that they're there because they deserve to be there, and that they've done things that are so horrible and so awful that that's the only place they should be, and that they're lucky to be there, rather than being kicked out of the Sea Org entirely. That's kind of the mindset when you go into that thing. So you're doing the program with the idea of straightening yourself out and becoming a better person. So by the end of it, yeah, you kind of think, in order to graduate the thing, you have to basically convince yourself and everybody else that you are rehabilitated. So, in that frame of mind and in that context, there's, you get quite a bit out of it when you can, if you're thinking, if your context is, I need to be a better Sea Org member and I need to be a better Scientologist, then the actions that you do while you're on the RPF, create that. And so at the end, you think you've gotten something out of it. I look back on it now, and I have, nothing really super positive to say about it. I got in shape, because you run around everywhere. I was definitely in very good shape when I finished the RPF physically. And I will say that there is something to be said about putting every aspect of your life under a microscope. All the running around and the yelling and the screaming and the push-ups and the running and all that stuff, That's kind of for the birds. That stuff was just degrading stuff, and I have nothing positive to say about any of that. But during that 3 years that I was on the RPF, I had to examine my entire life very, very microscopically and look at decisions that I had made and things that I had done. I mean, they really rub your face in all the stuff you've done. But at the same time, you're looking at that stuff with an eye toward how can I be better? How do I not continue to do those things? And some of the things that we do in life, when we're kids, when we're teenagers, when we're young adults, we're pretty stupid, and pretty silly, and some were pretty not cool. And when you look at that and you examine that from a point in the future, you go, wow, that was really not cool that I did those things. And you make some decisions, maybe you do some life, affirmation type stuff that sort of puts you in a frame of mind where you're not going to be living life like that anymore. Maybe that's positive, maybe that's a good thing. Certain aspects of it were for me. I could have done without all the other nonsense that you have to endure as an RPFer in order to look at those things. I think you could do all of that without all the degrading, debasing, yelling and screaming and everything else, the sleepless nights and the all the running around. It's a very disturbing thing to look at what actually goes on the RPF, and it's obviously it's a little hard for me to talk about really clearly, but that's kind of a little review for you on that. I'm sure at some point I will probably do a more complete view of the RPF, break down what it actually consists of, what people do on it, what the program is, like why does it take 3 years to get through it? Because, by the way, 3 years and 3 months, which is how long I spent on it, was a fairly average time. Some people take significantly longer. Not very many people take significantly shorter. The least I've ever heard of anybody taking on the RPF was 2 years. But most people are doing about three or 4, years. So, it's a sucky thing, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And I'm not happy that I did it. I'm not glad I did it. I don't look back on it and go, boy, it was really bad, but I really got some good things out of it. No, that's not really how I look at it. I'm more looking at it as, well, I did get some things out of it, but I really wish I hadn't done that.